Good afternoon.
Hello. Hello.
And I would like to say thank you very much for inviting me, but I know that none of you did. But thank you all for inviting me, and I'm delighted that so many of you have managed to find time in your busy day, I've no doubt, to come and listen to me as well. And I hope talk to me too at the same time. It's a very, very important topic, I think, that we're talking about today, and I'm delighted to be able to come here to talk to you about it. I've worked with the senior leaders in this school, gosh, how many years, I don't know, too many years, doing various training events and so on, because that's what I do most of the time. My name is Paul James, and I am director of a company called Barrett Briny Education Services, and we have for about 15 years been delivering safeguarding training of all sorts in schools, but also with other agencies. We are a multi-agency team. In fact, including a psychotherapist, and a magistrate, and police officer, and social workers, and my own background is from education. 40 odd years ago, I trained as a primary school teacher, and I taught in prep schools for the first 15 years of my career. And then I decided to become a secondary school teacher. Not sure why, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. And I was working in a school which was designated for children to integrate children with additional needs. And we had around 350 children with additional needs out of 1,200 on roll. And eventually I became head of an independent boarding school. I had 650 11 to 18-year-old boarders, full time. That's why I've got white hair now, I think. I always say there isn't much I haven't seen teenagers do at least twice, because they never learn the first time, do they? Any of us, I wonder. I then started working, having run two schools, one in this country and one in East Africa. I started working in local authorities around the safeguarding agenda, working with vulnerable children and families. And so lots and lots of experience of that area of work as well. But I often think perhaps the most important experience I have for today is that I have 5 children of my own. You thought I'd have learned, wouldn't you, after about the first 2 or 3, but there we go. And I have children that range from 32 years down to 14. So I've got plenty of experience as well firsthand of those challenges that adolescence and teenage years have for parents. And I think it's very, very important, therefore, that we understand one another in that respect. So the important thing, of course, we're looking at is trying to work out just what are the risks in 2022, because it's a very different world, isn't it? Well, certainly a different world from the one I was in when I was a child and teenager, way back last century. I don't know whether any of you remember that far back. I don't suppose you do. But the point is the world has changed very, very fast indeed, hasn't it? And actually keeping up with it is a real challenge for us. Not so much of a challenge for the children in terms of working out how to use the technology. I got a new phone the other day, handed it straight over to my 14-year-old, said, "Show me how this works, please." Because that's it, that they know how to use the technology. But there's no shortcut, is there, to the wisdom that comes with age? And that's the difficulty. They can do these things without actually thinking about the implications of what they can do with those devices. So, what are we trying to do? Well, this is why we're here. Think about just how these devices are used these days and what the potential risks are with them. Don't know whether any of you are fluent in TextSpeak. We'll have a look later on, see if you can use TextSpeak. But thinking about the signs of vulnerability and then hopefully giving you some tools to help your children to keep themselves safe, because that's the fundamental thing, isn't it? Schools can only do so much. Schools can educate, but schools cannot control what the children are doing outside and when they're at home. And that has to be, obviously, with us parents. There's nobody else, is there, that can take that responsibility. Why are we here? That was a German internet safety video that was prepared some years ago. Little seems a bit OTT? Not really, because those are exactly the sort of things that children can be exposed to, and of course that they direct one another to as well on their devices. And where do they do it? In their bedrooms. We'll come back to that in a minute. Back in 2015, the European Union, when we were still part of it, debated when should be the age of consent for the digital world for our children and teenagers. And it was debated long and hard, and they looked at all sorts of research amongst children and teenagers, and it was actually determined back then that the age of consent for the digital age should be 16. And it was enshrined in European law that 16 was the age. Now, of course, a lot of social media platforms talk about 13 being the age of consent, because that's US law. And of course, it's not about protecting the children it's about protecting the providers of those platforms. Because if a child is 13 or claims to have been 13, then something goes wrong because of something they've shared, then the internet's platform provider is protected, not the children. Yes?
You define consent.
Define consent. Well, that's an interesting point. The definition of consent, of course, means that somebody having freedom and capacity to consent. And the difficulty is that the children may have freedom, but do they have the capacity? And that's the question, really. Does that answer your question?
Slightly. Is this with regards to just sort of access to information, or is it with regards to transacting?
It's largely with regards to what they share themselves, what they post themselves.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, because they are consenting to share that if they're over the age of 13.
Is it not also correct then to point out that the consent part of it as well is also you allowing the children themselves to make a decision on whether or not any of the data about themselves and their usage is shared? Because that's more what it's about.
That's
the access to what they look at being provided to other providers without them knowing if they consent.
Absolutely, and that's another issue, of course, and that's a different issue, if you like. Yeah, absolutely. But the bottom line, of course, is that if the children are making these choices, are they making them with the freedom and capacity to share that information? And that's the bottom line, really, and that's where we obviously have to come in as parents in making those decisions with them and for them. We can't make all the decisions for them, of course, as they get older. We have to make the decisions with them. Just going back, do you remember when your children were very young? I'm sure you taught them not to play on the railway, didn't you? We know about rail safety. We're pretty good about teaching our children about that, aren't we? And the real world, of course, impacts upon that. We're pretty good on road safety too. We teach the children about how to cross the road. We teach them to ride their bike before we let them go out on their own, don't we? So we're pretty good on that as well. Because that is the real world, isn't it? We're pretty good about not talking to strangers too. And we talk to them about not talking to strangers in the real world. So we're pretty good about that as well, I think, as parents. Because that, again, is part of the real world. But when we come to the internet and social media world, the virtual world, do we perhaps feel a little bit bemused, like the woman in the video at the beginning? Do we feel that we really are on the ball with it? Are we completely au fait with it all? Can we help our children to use it sensibly and make those informed choices? It's fantastic, isn't it? I have to say, I think the internet is the greatest invention of the 20th century. It's brilliant. I don't know whether any of you are in the same situation as me with my 14-year-old daughter. She comes home from school sometimes with the homework, and I look at it and I think I haven't got a clue how to do that. So I nip upstairs, I Google it, and then I come down because I know what I'm talking about. Do you do that too, or is that just me cheating? But Google is fantastic. It is incredible. 10 trillion searches per year. They've got 92% of the market in Google. We all go to Google first, don't we? Bing is really dragging behind, and yet that's one that often comes up on a new device, isn't it? It's been set by Bing to go there. But they're not getting in there with Google. Bill Gates, of course, I think he made this statement back in 2017, and I thought it was really interesting at the time, that the technology would double every 7 or 8 months by the end of that year. So how fast is it doubling now? Very, very quickly indeed. But as he says here, we overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. How do we keep up is the big issue. Any of you got a drone? You got a drone? Yeah. I mean, you may use drones for work. I don't know. Have you given your children a drone, or do your children play with the drone? Because, of course, if they play with the drone over your garden, that's not an issue, really. It's your space, isn't it? But if they take it over the neighbour's garden and hover outside the bedroom window, they're committing offences against the law. And, of course, if they fly them in an area where there's civil aviation routes, then they could be into real trouble, couldn't they? It's actually very easy for children to get into trouble with the law with the devices that they're using. And yet we tend to just let them do it, don't we? How many internet-enabled devices do you have in your home? Would you just do a quick count up in your head? Yours, your partner's, your mother-in-law's, if she's a silver surfer, that's the term for us people. All your sons, daughters, offspring. Don't forget the televisions, they're probably smart TVs. Don't forget the sat-navs in the garage, or on the motorbike, or in the car. Don't forget the fridge. Is that internet-enabled yet? How many internet-enabled devices do you actually have in your home? When you get home today, have a look around. You'll be astonished how many there are, actually. When I talk to children in secondary schools, particularly, but also in primary schools, upper primary, I ask the same question. And they are usually coming up with figures of 20, 30, 40, 50. So actually, go home and have a good look when you get home, including the ones that are in the cupboard gathering dust because you've got a replacement device. There are huge numbers of internet-enabled devices in our homes. And we talk about the Internet of Things now, don't we? So you can have an internet-enabled kettle. So you can turn it on your way home. So that it's boiling when you walk in. As long as you remember to fill it before you left for work in the first place. I don't know about you, but personally I feel I can just wait long enough for the kettle to boil. But other devices like this. Have you come across Kayla? Kayla is an internet-enabled doll. There's a whole range of them, teddies, bunnies, all sorts. It's one of the easiest devices to hack into. They're made in China, very little security, and you can very, very easily hack into one of these things. And, of course, the child may be talking to Kayla, but actually they could be talking to somebody in a car outside your house, because they could have been hacked into. So we have to ask ourselves, just because we can buy these things, is it going to enhance our life or not? That's perhaps the first choice that we have to make, don't we? Is it really going to benefit our life and that of our children? So a few questions that we have to think about in terms of risk. How many children access the internet via a mobile phone or other handheld device? Well, the answer, of course, is 100% now, isn't it? Because there is no such thing as there is. You can get a desktop computer, I suppose. Certainly my son, one of my sons, who's a gamer, has a desktop computer as well as several other devices. But they all use mobile devices, don't they, now? When my oldest children, they're 32 and 28, were teenagers, we had, do you remember dial-up and MSN? Yeah? We had one desktop computer in the dining room. And we all knew what was being done on it. But now they've all got mobile devices. We have no idea what's going on, do we? How many of them actually have filters on their devices? Could I just ask you, would you put your hand up if you've given your child a mobile device of any sort? Would you put your hand up? Would you keep it up if you took the cellophane wrapper off first? Because most of us don't. And if we don't, we can't possibly have installed any security on the device. If they're using it at home, you can secure your router. You can put filters on your router. You can have them in the cloud as well. If they're in school, they'll be on a firewall network. But when they're on 3G, 4G, you have 5G network. I got very excited the other day. My new phone is on 5G. I didn't even know it was available, but there we go. But if they're using those, then actually we have no control over it unless we install some sort of filter on the device itself. And I love to see parents wresting back the devices from their 13-year-olds to put security on. Good luck with that. How many of them use privacy settings on all their devices? How many of them check them regularly? How many of them receive links with friends, from friends? And of course, links can actually be all sorts of things that we've no idea what they are. The worst case, of course, is that they are something like a Trojan. a virus of any sort, but a Trojan is a particular virus that can take control of your computer, of course. And once the Trojan has taken control of your computer, somewhere in the world has got complete control of their device. They can see everything that's on it, and they can even manipulate it. So we need to make sure that they never ever open links that have just appeared, that they don't know the origin of. I always say to the children when I'm talking to them, if you get a link from a friend saying, have a look at this funny YouTube or TikTok clip or something of that sort, then don't open it. Go to school the next day, check with them whether it was them that sent it, and then open it. Just wait 24 hours. The difficulty is that the problems are about speed. The problems with the railways was about speed. The problems with road safety was about speed. The problems with the internet is about speed of reaction, isn't it? Because we instantly knee-jerk react to things. How many of us just immediately respond to emails? If I'm writing a tricky email, I always do it in Word, leave it on my desktop overnight, and have a look at it the next morning and think, did I really write that? Goodness me. But the trouble is, children very often do. They respond instantly. Always remember my second son, 28, when he was 14. He used to come home from school, sling his bag across the kitchen. I'm sure this is familiar for many of you. He'd sling his bag across the kitchen, and he'd go down the corridor, and he'd shout over his shoulder, I've just got to go on the internet, Dad, and sort out a problem from school. I used to call down the corridor after him, why don't you wait till the morning? Might not be such a big issue by then. But it isn't. They don't. And it's instantly inflamed, isn't it? It's the speed with which these decisions are made so often. And how many of them use the internet in their bedroom? They all do, don't they? Because they're mobile devices. Where in the world do you feel safest? Personally, in my bedroom. My wife says I can sleep anywhere, but personally, in my bedroom, I think is the safest place. And if they are thinking they're safe, they're taking greater risks there than they would anywhere else in the world. So we need to stop thinking about those things as internet-enabled devices, but instead think of them as open windows, because they are windows, and that's why, of course, Microsoft call it Windows, because you can see and hear both ways through open windows. We are the tablet generation, aren't we? Mobile devices. 70% using laptops, tablets, or smartphones. Nearly all children, 5 to 15, are online at some point, and even younger. We do an internet safety presentation for 20 minutes with reception class and year 1, because they all use the devices too, don't they? 96%, of course, watch any type of view on demand. We no longer have a 9 o'clock watershed, do we? So it's not just social media, it's not just the internet, it's actually all forms of media, isn't it? The children can access 24/7 from anywhere in the world. So we have to stop and think as well, because how do we filter what they are viewing on Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever else it might be? Very few actually watch live TV these days, do they? And video sharing platforms, of course, so things like TikTok, YouTube, and so on, are increasingly significant, and they certainly were seen to massively increase further during the pandemic lockdowns, because they couldn't go out to play, so they were doing more and more and more on those sorts of platforms. 70% of 5 to 15s play games online, more boys than girls, 78% to 64%, but the boys actually are more likely to be gaming, connecting to friends. We forget that a game is a social media, just the same as Snapchat, Instagram, or anything else, because they are talking to other people. 54% of them use social media sites or apps. 87% of 12 to 15-year-olds are using them. And the sites and apps are around a third are using Instagram and Snapchat. Facebook is a bit passé now, isn't it, for them? Because mum and dad are using it. So they keep well away from that, don't they? Food for thought. A new blog is created every 10 seconds. What's a blog? Sometimes people say it's a diary, an online diary, which I find fascinating. My sister, way back last century, she was 3 years older than me. She kept a diary, had a padlock on it. She kept it in the top drawer of her chest of drawers in her bedroom and woe betide little brother if he went anywhere near it. But now, we all keep our diary online. We share our thoughts with the world. And let's hope the thoughts that we share, we do wisely. I wonder how wisely sometimes the children do. We don't help them to think about the decisions they're making. 500 million posts on Twitter every day and 1.9 billion active users on Facebook. As I say, for the children, that's a bit passé now. They're using Instagram and Snapchat much more. One of the issues, of course, with Instagram and Snapchat is that they sell themselves as temporary. But there's nothing temporary on the internet, actually. Of course, somebody can take a screenshot of it. And actually, there was an incident a couple of years ago where 70,000 images were accidentally released back onto the internet from a Snapchat server somewhere in the world. And that could be anywhere in the world. Wherever there's cheap land to put a load of servers in, the servers can be there. We have no control over them. The children certainly have no control over them. And yet the images will be there. They will be there anyway for 30 days on the Snapchat server or on the Instagram server. They're kept for 30 days anyway. And only then would they be disposed of. But how effectively are they disposed of? Because we have no control over that. And so TikTok and things like that, of course, are incredibly important to the children, aren't they? And they're sharing so much on TikTok. It used to be Lively and Musical.ly, but of course they were bought out by TikTok. But everything that was ever put there on Lively and Musical.ly is still there, just under the TikTok label instead. It's still all there. There's nothing temporary, really. So, when we were looking at this research, when the research was being undertaken, before the decision was made about the age of digital consent, this was the sort of feedback that the European Union got from children. They're all very similar concerns, aren't they? Some of it's about extreme things. And that one in the bottom right-hand corner there. Scary things. But the important bit is, he says, I saw something at my friend's house, but I can't get it out of my head. It's no good us saying to them, they mustn't do it, because they'll just go to their friends and do it, won't they? We don't allow them to use the devices and help them to use them wisely. In our hope, they'll use them elsewhere, won't they? So, as we move on, if we did remove the devices from the children, we would be socially disadvantaging them, wouldn't we? And therefore, we've got to accept they're there, and we've got to accept that the children need help to use them. And just the same as their bicycle is there, and we gave them help to ride it before we let them go on their own. We are told we must protect our children. Of course we should protect our children, but actually the best way to protect them is to educate them, to help them to make the choices, isn't it? Because they are the ones making the choices, the decisions about whether to press the button or not. But the presentations we give to children, we call stop, think, then click. And that's the crucial thing, isn't it? Getting them to stop to think about the implications before they press send. The internet is amazing, I think. It's brilliant, it's fantastic. We couldn't do without it, could we? Every one of us is dependent upon it to a greater or lesser extent. Now, the key thing, of course, about it, the things that are so great are these, aren't they? We can find the answer to absolutely anything. Is anybody else old enough to remember encyclopedias? You know, we spent hours leafing through those things, didn't we? Now, at the touch of a button, we can find the answer to everything, including my daughter's homework. Whew, thank goodness. At the touch of a button, we can get it. We can get anything from anywhere at any time. It's brilliant, isn't it? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, from wherever in the world we want to get it, we can get it instantly. Amazing. Therefore, we can do anything we want, can't we? It is instant communication. We've already talked about the difficulty around there. We can talk to anyone, anywhere, at any time. Fantastic. We've got to decide whether it's sensible to do so. 24/7, 365, and it is great fun. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be. But if we can find the answer to anything, perhaps we can find things we don't want to see. We can do things we regret. We can be contacted by anyone, anywhere, anytime. And there's no escape either. We are told in a document that schools have to work to, which is Keeping Children Safe in Education 2021, it's the key guidance document for all schools. We're told that we should protect the children from 3 C's. Well, we used to be told 3 C's. Inappropriate content, inappropriate contact, and their own inappropriate conduct. But the 4th one was added this year in our Keeping Children Safe in Education 2021, and that is commerce, inappropriate commerce. So there's 4 C's now we have to protect our children from. Appropriate content, contact, conduct, and commerce. Contact, including contact with peers, of course. There's been a lot of research by psychologists into the impact of the internet on human behaviour. And all the research I've seen has come up with 3 very similar points. It provides opportunity, and that is opportunity for good as well as bad. As we've said, you can find the answer to anything, it's brilliant. It's opportunity for good, but it's also opportunity for bad, because there is no escape if somebody wants to get at you. I was bullied when I was at school, but at least when I got home, I had respite until the next day. Now there is no respite, is there? 24/7. So opportunity for good, but also for bad. The other impact it has, apparently, is it has a normalizing effect. Because you can, at the touch of a button, in your bedroom, it must be okay. So it has a normalizing effect to some of the things that are being done by adults and children. And that also is leading to an inuring effect, becoming numb to certain things. We are accepting things perhaps now that we never accepted before. And yes, we have to recognize that language and life evolves. Of course it does. But how fast, we're back to speed again, how fast do we want to allow it to in our children's lives? So, as I said earlier, we're pretty good about keeping children safe, about not talking to strangers in the real world. But what about on the internet? Virtual world becomes their real world, doesn't it? And there's an interesting misnomer, isn't there? We talk about online friends. When I'm doing presentations with years 5 and 6 upwards through to secondary school, right up to 6th form, I always ask them, can you define what is a friend? And almost inevitably, very quickly, we get somebody saying, a friend is someone that you know so well that you can trust. I say, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? But we talk about online friends. How much do we know? Do we really know that we can trust them? There's no reason why they shouldn't have them there. They just need to think about that and remember they only know about those friends what that person has chosen to tell them, to show them. But we have an over-trusting element, don't we, in our decision making, perhaps amongst children. How old would you say that person is, that child is? What do you reckon? About 12? 12, 13? Yeah, maybe? Okay. Amazing what you can do with a Snapchat filter, isn't it? He's got to be 35 at least, hasn't he? So even if somebody shows you something, how accurate is it? Yeah, it is creepy, isn't it? But it's so easy with these filters. The children have to remember that what they are being shown may not be the reality. And then there's oversharing. Never ceases to amaze me how many adults tell the world where they are all the time. We're having a fantastic time on the beach in Barbados. Okay, and here's our address on my profile, and the house is empty for the next fortnight. We overshare. Children certainly overshare. I said about text speak. Anybody fluent in text speak here? Shall we see? I hate text speak. Are we afraid of it? Is it a mystery to us? Is it just hieroglyphics? We embrace it because, let's face it, if you can read this, then what's the problem? Vowels are now superfluous, except on Wordle. Okay, ASLP. This is an easy one.
Age, sex, location.
Well done. Age, sex, location, and picture. 143. Oh, number codes. Any ideas? Yes.
What is it?
Who said that? I've never known anybody say that before. Well done.
What is that?
She really hit them. She really hit 133. It means I love you. I have no idea why, but your colleague here does know. FWB.
What does it mean?
I'm not sure, to be honest. FWB.
Oh, it's the letters. Number of letters.
Oh, yes, it is. You're right. It's the number of letters in each word. Quite right. Yes. Well done. Well spotted. Are you good at Wordle as well?
I remember my
FWB. FWB. Yes. Friends with benefits. Yeah, absolutely. KPC. As opposed to KFC, which is Kentucky Fried Chicken. KPC. KPC? Keeping parents clueless. What about the next one? Anybody good at Pictionary? Let's get together. LMIRL. Let's meet in real life. Let's meet. Yeah. What do you eat? Oh. You see, the issue is speed. Always.
Thank you.
Okay. What about this one? WE. I can always guarantee a parent will say weekend.
Yeah.
Because that's what we live for, isn't it? The weekend. This is teenage speak. There's no T in it. Whatever. There's no T in it. NMU. National Miners Union, somebody said to me, so I showed their age. NMU. No. It's a response to a question. What are you doing?
Not much.
Not much you. Well done, thank you. It was back there. TMI.
Too much information.
Yes, here we go. We're on a roll now. CTN. CTN. Can't talk now because Mum's just walked into the room. CHLN. Just say it.
Children.
No, just chilling.
Chilling.
Chilling. I said to you, vowels are superfluous, aren't they? Chilling.
Chilling.
And of course, oh, sorry, did I go too quickly again? Of course, they don't just use TextSpeak now because all their devices have got keyboards. So they're actually reverting at times to use real words. Amazing.
We used to have the T9, if you remember.
Yeah.
The 3 letters for each key.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, the Nokias. Yeah.
We had tendinitis to the thumb.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. I can still write gobbledygook even with a keyboard, but there we go. Netflix and chill. Do you know what that means?
Having sex or something.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
it does.
Getting together.
Yeah.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
wait, that's right.
Really?
And you all bought that ice cream thinking that was so much fun.
Popcorn.
Family fun, huh?
We're buying popcorn.
Yeah, so when I watched Netflix.
And then there's YOLO. You'll get that one. You only live once. Yeah, it's like general encouragement to do something dangerous or stupid, really. Go on, just do it. They challenge one another. YOLO. You only live once. What about these? Yeah, hey, well done. Whoever said that? Yep. Your eyes only. POS. Not point of sale. POS. P911. If only it was police. It's not.
Parents'
It's
emergency.
Parent emergency. Yeah. SOS. Not save ourselves or help. PIR. Parents in room. And PCN. OC. OC. Anybody?
Oh my God.
No parents at home. It actually also does mean that. So an original character from fan art or fan fiction. So there's two meanings to that one. And so let's hope it's the second one, not the first one. Anyway, so TextSpeak. How do we keep up with it? If we see the TextSpeak over their shoulder, it's worth us going online, searching up what they mean. There are lots of lexicons out there that will tell you exactly what they mean. Peer-on-peer abuse, we're told, in keeping children safe in education can be around cyberbullying and things like that. But also about intimate relationships and, of course, sexual behaviours as well. And unfortunately, the children are becoming much more sexualised more and more earlier and earlier. Again, because of their exposure to so much adult sexual behaviours in all their view-on-demand TV and the films and everything they watch. There's so much more exposure to sexualized behaviours, isn't there? Even for very young children, because we can't control it with a 9 o'clock watershed any longer. We have to control it by talking to them about these things. It can also be, of course, consensual and non-consensual sharing of images. What's called youth-produced sexual imagery now. Prior to 2015, and following the Sexual Offences Act 2003, if a person under the age of 18 takes a photograph of themselves naked or semi-naked, they've committed an offence. They've created child pornography under the Sexual Offences Act 2003. It's a criminal offence that carries a prison sentence, creating child pornography. If they've sent it to somebody, boyfriend or girlfriend, they've uploaded child pornography, another offence, carrying a prison sentence. If they are the boyfriend or girlfriend, they've downloaded it, they've downloaded child pornography, another criminal offence under the Sexual Offences Act 2003. If they've sent it to somebody else because they thought it was amusing or they wanted to show off, then they've distributed child pornography under the Sexual Offences Act 2003. Serious sexual offences under that act. And the police were having to pursue this with young teenagers, young adolescents, under the Sexual Offences Act 2003. But at the end of 2015, they said, hang on, enough's enough. Because we don't want to criminalise these children. They're making mistakes. They're making mistakes that are damaging them. And in order to protect them, we've got to find a way to do that rather than criminalising them. And so on 1st of January 2016, this phrase, youth-produced sexual imagery, was introduced to differentiate between what we've just talked about and abusive child pornography. And alongside that was something called Outcome 21. And what Outcome 21 is, well, if a crime has been committed, the police have to have an outcome. I usually ask, actually, are there any police officers here? I always like to check. And solicitors, lawyers, barristers? Oh, right, okay. I always ask beforehand normally, so you got away with it this time. So I like to know where the lawyers are in the room. Makes me feel a lot more comfortable when I know who I'm talking to. But seriously, this phrase, youth-produced sexual imagery, the police have to have an outcome. If there is a crime identified, they have to get an outcome. That might be imprisonment, it might be a conviction, it might be acquittal, whatever. They have to get an outcome. But in 2016, January 1st, they created Outcome 21, which says a crime may have been committed. The evidence of that crime may exist, but the police can decide whether to pursue it as a crime or not, or pass it back to schools and parents to educate the child about the vulnerability they've created for themselves. Upskirting, of course, has become a criminal offence already. It's sad that we've had to create that extra piece of legislation, isn't it? But it has become so prevalent because of children carrying their mobile phones all the time and using them indiscriminately. And of course, we now have a bill before Parliament which is going to talk about cyber flashing. I don't think there's anybody in the room that remembers a childhood in the 60s and 70s like I do, but back then we had public information films about not talking to strangers. There was always a man in a long beige Mac with a puppy under one arm and a bag of sweets. We knew not to talk to men in long beige Macs with puppies under their arms and bags of sweets. It confused me at the time because Harold Wilson, our Prime Minister, wore a long beige Mac. That's another story. But actually, if one of those men in long beige Mac was to do that, it was called flashing. But excuse my expression, sending a dick pic has become so prevalent, particularly amongst teenagers, that they are going to it's likely to become enacted. It hasn't been yet, but it is before Parliament to be enacted to make cyber flashing a criminal offence as well. And so when those children, if you've got boys who've got sons and they send a dick pic, they've potentially committed an offence, and certainly it's likely in the future that that could be very easily an offence specifically. Evidence indicates that certain groups are more vulnerable.
Sorry, on the previous slide, what's hazing?
Oh, sorry, hazing. It's an American term, actually. It's using some sort of bullying tactic to initiate people. So initiation into a gang, or initiation into a particular group, or initiation at university, those sorts of things. And it usually involves pretty unpleasant things. Okay? Certain groups appear to be more vulnerable than others. Girls certainly statistically more than boys, but not exclusively. Obviously, children with additional needs can be particularly vulnerable. And children that identify as LGBTQ, plus, are also perhaps, statistically, it would appear more vulnerable. That, I don't know why, but I think that may be because they are more likely to look for a friendship, look for a relationship online. So they're talking to people that they feel safer with, because they may have misread the signs if they approach somebody in the real world. But look at that over the top there, on the other side. 80% of teens have witnessed terms like sket and slut describing girls in a mean way, and 68% have seen others using homophobic or transphobic language. There's an awful lot of this sort of stuff going on. Because children are in their bedroom, they're remote, they might not say it face to face, but they will say it when they're online in their bedroom. SEND, special educational needs or disabilities. Sorry, I don't know where that came from, that question. With special educational needs or disabilities. Sorry. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm used to talking to teachers that would know that term, I beg your pardon. Oh! Recognise anybody? Oh! 2 minutes last night in my hotel room. It took me to take those pictures off the internet. Obviously the school website, there's nothing wrong with those pictures. I just want to illustrate just how easy it is for anybody to take a picture from the internet. It is literally 2 minutes. And of course, all those images actually, whilst they're on the school's website, also come up on Google Images. Because once an image is out there, it belongs technically to Google, interestingly. So again, those images that people post, it always surprises me how many parents will post images of their own children. Somebody said earlier on, actually, that I'm not going to point to anybody in particular because it would be rude to do so, but somebody said just now about the fact that, of course, you're creating part of a cyber footprint of that child without their consent. How many people take photographs at barbecues and parties and post them on social media without getting the consent of the people in the photographs? We don't think about it, do we? So, when I'm talking to younger secondary age students, I ask them this. Ask yourself, would I be happy for grandma to see these pictures? That's a good yardstick, isn't it? Unless you've got a particularly progressive mother-in-law, I don't know. But I think it's quite a good yardstick, isn't it? Before I decide to press send, would I be happy if my grandma saw this picture? Maybe not, so maybe I shouldn't. But the question they have to ask themselves is, when I'm a grandma or grandpa, will I still be happy for my grandchildren to see it? Because they will. What we post now will still be there in 70 years' time. Imagine the conversation that some of your children will have with their grandchildren. They'll be sitting there in their chair and their grandchildren come round for lunch on Sunday and they come rushing in. Grandpa, look at this picture of you at a party with that girl in 2022. What exactly are you doing and which way up is that photo supposed to be held? That will be the conversation they have with their grandchildren, because the images they put now will still be there in 70 years. And of course, they can be copied, they can be tagged by others, become part of a cyber footprint. They can be copied to anybody in the world in nanoseconds. And of course, they can also be manipulated or altered at the touch of a button. There's me. There's me in my dreams. It's sad that everybody laughs at that. I've been working. Oh, I haven't been working out. And I deliberately left a bit fuzzy around the head. I didn't want anybody to think it was me. But the point is, even if it was an innocent image that the child has posted, somebody can take it and with Photoshop instantly turn it into something much more sinister. I would appreciate it if you don't post those pictures, those of you that are taking those photographs of me, if that's all right. I mean, I'm saying it jokingly, but actually quite seriously as well. I don't put images of myself on the internet any more than I have to for those reasons. So 45% of respondents said they'd witnessed peers editing photos to sexualize them. And of course, you can pretend to be somebody else as well. Hey, I'm talking to George Ezra. Am I? Well, it may be called George, it may be Ezra, but it's not the one I'm thinking of. Because you can take a picture off the internet and pretend to be that person, can't you? So easily. So, it's fantastic. It is their future. In fact, it's their present as well, isn't it? And it's really, really great. But we also need to recognise, of course, relationships are going to be built on the internet. They already are, aren't they? And many of those sites that are actually intended for adults, of course, children can access, aren't they? So who are we flirting with? Do we actually know who we are talking to? Do our children actually know who they are talking to? And are they really people that they know that they can trust? Because they call them online friends. So what else do we, as well-intentioned parents, need to know? And teachers come to that. What do we need to know? Well, I think the first thing we've got to recognise is that it's called a network for a reason. I was a geography teacher in a former life, and so we talked about networks, and networks have nodes and links, don't they? And of course, if dark green shares something with dark blue has another network off this picture, and dark green has no knowledge of who's in that network. And yet dark blue now has image, information, whatever, from dark green. We as adults need to recognise this, and the children, we need to help the children to understand this. There is no such thing as a secure network on the internet, because they're all connected by links to other nodes in other networks. We are creating a cyber footprint, and unlike the snow footprints, it won't disappear. It will be part of our permanent image of us. And it can be good. In fact, to be honest, I think we actually do need a cyber footprint these days. It needs to be a positive cyber footprint, though, doesn't it? Because an awful lot of business, a lot of interviews and things are based upon, what have we found out about this person already from their social media? Is it a positive image or is it a negative image? Is there a balance between the amusement and the seriousness? Things again, going back to what schools have to work to, these phrases, just banter, part of growing up, just having a laugh, or boys being boys. We're told we cannot allow this to be excusing inappropriate behaviour between children. Banter is the one, isn't it? Bants. It's too hard to put an ER, so we put bants instead, apparently. It's not banter, is it? If it hurts somebody. Going back to commerce. Of course, some of the things that they may be offered, the latest technology, the latest devices, really exciting stuff. Or the games that they really want, that mum and dad haven't bought them, but somebody is offering them online. You and I know the expression, it's too good to be true. You and I know the expression, there's no such thing as a free lunch. We need to help our children to realise this too, that if something's being offered free, in this digital age, they're not the consumer, they're the product, aren't they? Because somebody is trying to find out what they're interested in. Lovely new job. I don't know if any of you are online influencers. But we as parents would like to be influencers, wouldn't we? Influencers of our children. But we need to recognise that, unfortunately, that began to be eroded the moment they went to school. Because what mum and dad said, oh, we have a teacher said, and then it very quickly it actually goes on to peers and other influencers. This is a wonderful new job in the virtual world. They become the real world. Appropriate content that they can access. I love that image. That leer on that ram's face. There's a whole new context on the concept of YouTube, isn't it? I wonder what percentage of teenagers have seen or viewed sexual images via the internet. How are they influenced by this? Some research was done with 2,000 children of that age, and they were asked how many would admit to having accessed pornography on the internet. 12 to 15-year-olds it was. How many do you think said yes?
40.
87.
It was 80%. 80%, yeah. 80% said they had. The parents of those children were asked, how many of you think your son or daughter might have accessed pornography on the internet?
0.
Was it 0?
10, 20.
It wasn't 20, it was 6.
Oh.
I hope that we are a little more savvy than that now. I hope it's more than 6% would actually acknowledge it, because it is so easy to do. We have to be realistic about this. The issue is, of course, this was another piece of research done with slightly older teenagers and young adults, And 50% said that looking at it too much can make you feel bad about yourself. Because when you look at the fantasy of porn and you compare it to the reality of your sex life, I'm not going to go into the details of you, but is it quite as good? Don't answer that. 63% of these teenagers and young adults said that they thought that porn could have a harmful effect on people's ideas about sex and sexuality. The issue really, of course, is that these young adults are capable of being discriminating about it. But how discriminating can our children be? They know how to work the devices, but do they have the wisdom to make the right choices? That's where we come in. We have to help them to make the right choices, don't we? I mentioned other forms of media, not just social media, of course. I don't know if anybody recognises that. Squid Game. Yeah, absolutely. Have you seen Squid Game? Anybody seen Squid Game? Yeah, okay, one or two. My 14-year-old daughter said she wanted to see it because all the friends at school were talking about it. So my wife and she sat down to watch an episode. They, to be honest, lost interest by the end of the first episode. And they didn't bother to watch anymore. But they did say, my daughter said to me, "Dad, you really need to watch this." I survived 3 episodes before I thought I've had enough of this. If you haven't seen it, the difficulty for me was that Squid Game is a game, I think, from South Korea. This program is made in South Korea. And it's particularly graphic, but it's based on children's games. I think 465 or 456 people who are desperate because they've got huge debts and things are invited secretly to this place. They don't know what they're going to do when they get there, but they all go along because they're so desperate. And they're invited to play this first game, which is what we used to call grandmother's footsteps way back last century. And I don't know whether you call it that these days, but where you're creeping up on somebody who's facing away from you, and when they turn around and they see you moving, you're out. Yeah. So this first game is based on that. So they all start not realizing that when they are caught, they don't just go out; they're shot in the head, graphically. By the end of that first episode, half of the people have been wiped out. The other half actually demonstrate and say, "We're not going to play anymore," and they will leave. But within a very short time, they creep back again, play the next games. I said that I watched the end of the 3rd episode, and that really finished it for me. I then read about it because I need to know what's going on here. And actually, when you read about it, the director has got a good purpose in what they're trying to say. They're trying to explore the human condition of desperation and what people will do when they are desperate, but also about power that people have over others. And essentially, these guards that have got different symbols, triangles, squares, circles, and diamonds, I think. I can't remember now. Anyway, these guards have got a huge amount of power, of course, over these individuals. The episode that finished it for me was one where they had to prick out a shape out of a piece of honeycomb without it breaking. Do you remember that episode? Yeah. The bit that finished it for me was that one of them broke his symbol, and so he knew he was going to be shot in the head. And so he grabbed the nearest guard and pulled his mask off. And it was a child. It was a young teenager. But because he'd been unmasked, the master of the game walked in and shot the guard in the head, and that was it for me. Finished, I'm afraid. I couldn't see it anymore. But the point is, the children watch it, but do they recognize what the Korean director is trying to say? I don't think so. Because also, of course, it becomes the real world. If you go on eBay or Amazon, you can buy the costumes in child sizes. You can even be a victim if you want, if you feel like it. And we are seeing, unfortunately, that virtual world becoming part of the real world in their conduct. And we are seeing groups of children playing this in those costumes. So the influencers that we would really like to have, I think, are us, aren't they? Rather than some of these other things. And we have to talk to the children about these things. We have to make sure that they understand about making choices about whether to watch things or not. You mentioned bullying. I think bullying is about abuse of power, really, isn't it? It's taking control of somebody or taking power over somebody And I went to the Oxford Dictionary for a definition. There you can see that. And then I thought, well, I'll have a look on Wikipedia. Of course, Wikipedia is a blog, isn't it? You can change history in Wikipedia. But I quite like this suggestion: intentional torment, verbal harassment, subtle methods of coercion, manipulation. And I thought that really sums up the power of cyberbullying, doesn't it? It's about taking control of somebody. It's about power. And the difficulty is that these things, of course, are incredibly powerful, aren't they? That's what makes it worse, because they are powerful tools. And a powerful tool can become an enormously powerful weapon, can't it? And weapons hurt, don't they? I asked some year nines once to define cyberbullying, and one of them said it's bullying that goes home with you, sir, which I thought was quite good, actually. Except it's not enough, is it? Because it doesn't just go home with you. It actually goes everywhere with you, doesn't it? Because of mobile devices. It goes everywhere with you. And it hurts. I remember my youngest daughter, she's 14, as I say now, but when she was 9, she came out of school one day, she was in tears. And she got in the back of the car. I said, "What's the matter, sweetheart?" And she said, so-and-so had said something horrid to her. It was a best friend, actually, and they've been best friends ever since as well. But on that particular day, best friend had said something horrible to her. And she was in tears. And I quoted the old adage that we got when I was at school way back last century. "Well, listen, sweetheart, never mind. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but names will never hurt me." There was a silence in the back seat. And then she said, "No, Daddy, you're wrong. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but names can break my heart." Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings. The trouble is, the children in their bedrooms will say these things. And it hurts, doesn't it? So, an awful lot of this sort of thing is going on all the time. 25% have experienced rumours about their sexual behaviour shared online. But actually, rumours can be about all sorts of things, can't they, on social media? One person gets it, and ever played Chinese Whispers? Social media is an electronic version of Chinese Whispers, isn't it? And those rumours can become inflated or changed or exaggerated very, very quickly. So again, we have to talk to our children about what we are receiving, what they are receiving, and what they're then sending on. Are they subtly changing the message, like in Chinese Whispers? There's an awful lot of issues, as we said already, around sexualized behaviours, admittedly to a little bit older than the children that you have in this school, but it is creeping down into 5 years, 5 and 6. That's as far as you go, isn't it? Yeah, years 5 and 6. It is creeping down there as well, unfortunately, because it's that normalising effect. I can't believe it's not banter. I'm sorry about that pun. Just didn't think it was banter. That was 7 of 300 who killed themselves in one particular year. It's about 300 a year are killing themselves because of things that they get through social media. Because people are doing it in their bedroom, they're saying things that they wouldn't say face to face, and it hurts. So, what else do we need to help the children with to understand? And I think this is an interesting one for all of us. I don't know about you, but we get our shopping from Ocado delivered. I am always being asked to rate my Ocado driver. How do you rate an Ocado driver? I have no idea what his driving is like, because he's always parked by the time I see him. But I do know he can carry 6 bags in each hand. Is that a good thing? But the bottom line is, of course, his job might depend on getting enough good ratings. A lot of people's jobs depend upon, and businesses depend upon, the feedback, the judging that people make. Does that sort of lead us to thinking that we have a duty to make judgments about things? Does that then lead us to make a feeling that we have a right to make judgment about things? Again, we need to help the children to work out the difference between being able to, having a duty to, having a right to make judgments. Because, of course, the judgments that they make very often are likes and dislikes, absolutes, aren't they? They like or they dislike. When I was a teenager, we looked in the mirror before we went out. We would look in the mirror and think, well, I used to think I'm not going to get any better, so I'm going anyway. But now they take a selfie, don't they? And they wait. And then somebody, one of their frenemies, there's a lovely internet word for you. You've got friends, you've got enemies, and in between you've got frenemies. One of their frenemies sends a dislike because it's amusing, it's just funny, bit of banter, but it triggers others to do the same. And then they begin to weigh up, how many likes did we get, how many dislikes did we get? There was moves in Australia to try to ban those on Instagram. And there was was an experiment in this country to see if we could control it so that only the person that initially posted something could see the likes and dislikes. So that would at least stop others copying the dislikes. But there's still huge impact because you have these weighing up, how many likes and dislikes do we get?
There is an episode in Black Mirror, I'm not sure if you've seen it,
Probably, carry on.
about the people's rating. So any interaction you as a person, like me being here or opening the door or getting something at the bottom, we would rate each other. And if you didn't have like a 4 out of 5 rating, you couldn't buy an airplane ticket and all these things. And that's probably something very, very similar. I encourage you to watch it.
Yeah.
This lady has a meltdown at the airport, and so from 4.2 she gets down to 3.8, whatever,
Yes.
because a lot of people vote her.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden she can't travel anymore, she can't rent a car anymore.
Yeah.
It's a bit of an extreme, like every episode of
Yes.
Black Mirror.
Yeah.
But that's kind of
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I commend the whole series of Black Mirror to you because it illustrates, yes, it takes it to extremes, but it's kind of makes us stop and think, doesn't it, about the impact on the human psyche of these sorts of things. So we have an over-dependence. We had over-trusting, we had over-sharing, we now have an over-dependence on other people's judgments. And of course, we need to recognize that games, as I said earlier on, are social networks. It's not just the Facebook and the WhatsApp and the Kik and the Yik-Yak and so on. It's actually, or the Yik-Yak, I think, is gone. But Instagram and Snapchat, it's also the games that children play that are social media, aren't they? So whatever the games are that they're playing, they're talking to real people. They may know them, they may not know them, but they may say things that they perhaps wouldn't say if they were not in their bedroom. So games may become anti-social networks. In just the same way as somebody could steal your pocket money when I was at school, somebody can steal your points in a game, somebody might stamp on your sandcastle on the beach, somebody can destroy your citadel and everybody gangs up on one person to destroy their citadel in Minecraft or whatever it might be. It's just the same. It's just been translated onto the internet, but also, more importantly, removed from the individual face-to-face personal contact, and therefore more likely to happen because they're in their bedroom doing it. We need to talk to them about that as well. Of course, they can be very simple games, but they can also cost a lot of money. Just make sure that your children haven't connected your credit card or your debit card to their games, because you could find yourself with huge bills. I remember, again, going back when my second son was an adolescent, way back last century, no, earlier this century. And I didn't know that he had apparently been connecting up to a site in Vanuatu. You know where Vanuatu is? It's an island in the South Pacific. I had a phone bill of £500, where normally I had about £30 bill. When I explored it, I discovered he'd been dialing up to this game that was based in Vanuatu. He did an awful lot of car washing that year. So, they are social networks. Sometimes people become so obsessed with them that they actually will pay other people to play the game for them because they can't get up to the next level. That's an obsession, isn't it? And they can sometimes start investing large amounts of money, Bitcoin as well as real other money. Well, Bitcoin is real money, of course. You can change it into any currency you like. Donald Trump loved that phrase, didn't he? Fake news. We have a tendency, don't we, to think that if it's on the internet, it must be true. Whatever it might be, whether it might be a rumor about something going on at school, or whether it be vaccinations. I was surprised the other day by my 28-year-old son, who said to me, well, about 6 months ago, he said to me, "Dad, I'm not having the vaccine. I don't trust it." He said, "I've read about it on social media." I said, "Have you considered reading some of the medical tomes about it as well?" But of course, we have the tendency to use social media for news. Believe it, don't we? We have to, again, help our children to be more discerning about what they are getting from the internet as well. Because yes, we can find the answer to anything, but we have to get them to analyse what they're actually getting from it. What does it? They need to look at the site itself that they're getting this information from. What was it produced? Was it produced? And there are many, many sites, of course, that we would rather they didn't get to. Things like these. Giving them ideas. Probably the people that created them did it for the right reasons, giving them the benefit of the doubt. But they just want to help people who may feel that they've got an eating disorder or something, to feel they're not alone, which is possibly a good thing. But the difficulty is it also can act as a learning model, how to do these things. So again, we need to monitor what our children are accessing. And only you can do that, of course, as parents. You have a right to, schools don't. Schools can't go through their devices. That would be an invasion of privacy. Yes?
Actually, my son's school does go through
Really?
their devices. And they, if any of the boys are playing a game that is not age appropriate, they get a detention and have to delete it, and the
Really?
parents get notified.
That's interesting. That's very brave for the school to do that, because they could find themselves being charged by some parents of invading the child's privacy. Really, the only people I feel have that right are parents. Some
The phone
parents
is
are
on the school grounds as well. So if the child is taking the phone to the school grounds,
yeah,
theoretically, doesn't the school have the right to?
if they thought, I mean, that under the regulations from the Education Act 2011, there was various guidance documents given to schools, including one about screening, searching, and confiscation, which was updated most recently in 2017. And they do have the right to look at devices if they think there is something that could impact upon could either be crime or disorder. I'm not sure how those games would fit into crime or
Underage,
disorder.
because the boys were underage in the game.
Yeah, okay. I mean, they're maybe using that as their reason for it. Okay, thank you. My wife is a midwife. She says that very often when she's dealing with a client, and usually it's the partner, the male partner, who is saying to her what she should be doing. She so far manages not to say it out loud, but she thinks it. Please don't confuse your Google search with my medical degree. Because we do that, don't we? The most commonly consulted GP these days, Dr. Google, isn't it?
Because you can't get a doctor.
Because you can't get a doctor's appointment. Yeah, absolutely. I know. So you try, you think, well, okay, I better try something, haven't I? Yeah.
Well, that's what they tell you as well. Go and look it up online.
Look it up online, yeah. I was really very concerned because my last doctor always used to look it up online himself, and I thought, hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. I thought you had a medical degree. Yeah, the difficulty is that children find these things, don't they? And they send them to one another. Oh, you said you were unhappy at school today. I found this online. Does this describe you? Oh, I'm depressed. I didn't realise I was until I read that, but I'm depressed. And that's the difficulty, because they direct each other to these things. And there's no adult oversight to help them to unpick these things. I don't know whether your children are the same, but my daughter loves doing these questionnaires online. Some of them make no sense to me whatsoever. But, who's your favourite personality? Oh, that means you like a certain type of pizza. I mean, I can see no psychological connection there, but there we go. But the other ones that she does, where you tick the boxes, you answer these questions, and then it gives you a diagnosis at the end. You're depressed. Oh, well, I wasn't until I read that.
We used to do those things though via magazines.
Oh, yes.
They were cheaper, so it's not that different.
No, absolutely.
From
And
what we have.
you're quite right. And a lot of these things are no different. The difference, to my mind, is that they are doing them in their bedroom and not talking about it to anybody. We've encouraged my daughter to talk to us about these things. And we talk frequently over the dining table. I often say the most important parenting tool we have is the dining room table, actually. And it's down to us to trigger these conversations over a meal or whatever. And then, of course, there's the conspiracy theories as well, isn't there? And we need to help young people to manage this as well, because they can become obsessed. There is a natural stage. Do any of you have older children, older teenagers? Yeah, yeah. Do you remember when they were about 13 or 14? They probably went through a period of anti-establishmentism. Yeah, you know, everything, any establishment is wrong, and that's where the conspiracy theories really focus in that early adolescence period. They come through it. Those of you that are about to enter that with your children, the good news is they do come through it, but it's a natural part of development of adolescence, isn't it? But if they become obsessed with that, and again, my own children, the next one's up, 22 and 21, I have to remember, they would come down from their bedroom having looked at these conspiracy theories, and they'd talk to us about it over the dining table. And that was so important, because otherwise they can become obsessed with these things. And we actually need to protect the children. More boys than girls, admittedly, but protect the children from saying things and doing things on social media that's actually contrary to the norm. I mean, Harry Vaughan, a perfectly intelligent sixth former from Tippin School, very nearly went to prison. I think he's ASD, autistic spectrum disorder, and that possibly was the mitigation that the judge took into account and not sending him down. But these two went to prison for similar things. So it's about protecting them. What are they doing up there, unsupervised? We need to be talking to them to make sure they're not getting so obsessed with a conspiracy theory, which, as I say, is a natural part of adolescence in those early years. We need to help them through that. Gone but not forgotten. Vine went and reappeared. Musically and Lively have disappeared but come back as TikTok, as I mentioned earlier on, and anything that was posted up on Lively or Musically is still there but under the TikTok label now. Children love things like that. They love the TikTok and they love the YouTube type pranks and things, don't they? And they'll copy the adult behaviours that they see on those videos. That woman in the middle there is spraying herself with an accelerant and setting light to it. It's a very satisfying woof effect, apparently. But if the children copy it, there's a considerable risk that they could burn themselves. And the difficulty is, as I say, they see things online and then they have a go. They copy them. You mentioned about magazines and they sort of articles, and you're absolutely right. They're just the same. And I think this is just the same as well. Do you remember chain letters? Yeah? You know, a letter came through. For any of you that don't know what a letter is, it's an envelope with a stamp as opposed to an electronic mail. Chain letters. They were pretty scary. You opened them up and it said, it usually started with a joke, and then it said, if you don't send this to 6 people, something dreadful is going to happen to you. You're going to die or something. It was a bit of a shock when you opened it, wasn't it? But then you actually began to rationalise it and say, well, hang on a minute, that can't actually happen. And of course, we have electronic versions of that now, don't we? Remember this one? Yeah. Prior to that, it was Killer Clowns. Before that, it was Blue Whale, was supposedly encouraging self-harm. It actually was a complete spoof, the whole thing of that one. But this one, Momo, is going to kill you. Momo is a statue. Stands about 2'6" high in a Japanese gallery. It's got the head of a doll and the body of a chicken. Art in the eye of the beholder, I suppose. And doesn't really do much for me, I don't know. But the point is, Momo is a statue. This is nothing to do with the artist and nothing to do with the gallery. Somebody just took a picture off the internet and started an electronic chain letter, effectively. I lived in Staffordshire when this happened, and Staffordshire police sent a letter to all schools telling them that they've got to send it out to all the parents to talk to their children about it. And I thought, no, it's completely the opposite of what we should be doing. We've got to play these things down, not build them up, haven't we? If our child has been traumatised by it, then as parents, yes, of course, we need to help them with that trauma. But let's not tell everybody else about it, because it will die. It'll disappear, as it has, and then the next thing will come along. And we actually need to talk to them more about the impact of this and how unrealistic it is, rather than actually saying, oh, look, this dreadful thing is happening. We've got to play these things down, I think, as parents, as teachers, as schools, because they will happen, just the same as those chain letters will kept dropping through our letterboxes. So, social networks, social vulnerabilities, we need to help the children to recognise what's going on. And of course, it means us having conversations at their level, using the language they will understand. But we need to do that as parents all the time, don't we? Just the same way as we did, let's say, that road safety, rail safety, or anything else. Of course, there's over-knowing as well, isn't there? There's over-knowing. If you have Snapchat, you have SnapMap. And if you have SnapMap, you know exactly where all your friends are. If all your friends are at one person's house and you've not been invited, what's the emotional impact of that? I have to say, when I was 14, I was a real geek. And I don't think I got invited to parties. I didn't know I hadn't been. But now, you know exactly where everybody is. So we need to help them with that as well. We need to talk to them about that and the implications of that. Maybe switch SnapMap off if they have Snapchat. We can know too much at times, can't we? So what can we do? Well, it's just the same as anything else, isn't it? In parenting, we need to protect them by helping them to make informed choices. We don't want to invade their space, do we? But we do want to keep them safe. We've got to help them to use it rather than pretend it doesn't exist. So we can monitor activities. One thing I learned having 5 children is that no 2 children can be parented in the same way. I'm sure you've discovered that too with your children, your own children, if you've got more than one. But 5 children, all of which had to be parented in 5 different ways. And for some, it might be necessary to monitor exactly what they're doing. And you can install an electronic monitor in their devices and so on. You can see exactly what they're doing. You can do it in the cloud, so they can't see it, they can't control it, as long as you've got a good password. So for some, that may be necessary. It's about a risk assessment for each child, isn't it? And determining how far you need to go. The ideal is much more around the dining room table, isn't it? Spying on your children. But it might be necessary if there's a particular child. We have to think about how we're going to do that. Of course, if you find something yourself that you're not happy with, you can report it to a government-sponsored website, Parent Report. And that's not just about internet, it's about any form of media, actually. And if enough people comment on it negatively, then something can be done about it, may be done about it. We as parents have the most incredibly difficult job, don't we? We walk a knife edge the whole time. It's a very fine line between keeping them safe and invading their space. And the older they get, the more we try not to invade their space, but the more we need to keep them safe. As that independence goes, we've obviously got to have helped them that next level of independence. So, the suggestion that came in that musical video at the beginning when you were all coming in and sitting down, it says start having sex education conversations from age 6. Human sexuality is perfectly normal, but actually there are certain things that are perfectly normal for a 6-year-old to do, which are sexual. And they gradually develop through adolescence into adult sexual behaviours. It's a human condition. So we need to be open about these sorts of things and talk to them in an age-appropriate manner at an age-appropriate level. We need to empower them to take ownership of their own bodies, to be in control of their bodies and minds, come to that. We also need to remind them there's nothing so awful that they can't tell somebody. And that if they won't tell us, because they don't want to let us down, then let's hope they'll tell the teachers. And then the teachers can talk with you, and together you can support those children. I ran a school in East Africa for a while. There's a lovely expression in Kenya. It takes a village to raise a child. We as parents can't do it on our own. Schools certainly can't do it on their own. It's got to be about a joint venture. Introduce safety concepts in a non-threatening manner that doesn't alarm them. So those conversations around the dining room table. Teach them to think about safe and unsafe situations. What are they doing that they could see that might be unsafe or might be safer? And again, it's these conversations around the table more than anything else. It's the most important parenting tool I think we have. And teach them how to respond appropriately if they identify unsafe situations. One of the things that we have to recognise with children is that there are obstacles to them telling us things. And these are 3 very powerful emotions for children and teenagers, aren't they? Guilt, fear, and embarrassment. Do you remember them? Don't think it was just me. But guilt, fear, and embarrassment actually get in the way of them telling people when they've done something wrong, they've made a mistake. We need to make sure those are not going to get in the way of them telling us if something's going wrong. Of course, they can click on the report abuse button to CEOPS, Child Exploitation Online Protection Service, which is a direct route that they can communicate with, or indeed Childline, 0800 1111. Make sure they're aware of that too, because if they are worried about telling you, I hope they would tell their teachers. Certainly the message they will be getting from schools all the time is, if you won't tell mum and dad, you can tell us. And of course, the advantage that teachers have over most of us parents is that most parents have had the experience of maybe 1, 2, 3 or 4 children. Have you taught? How many do you work with? I'm not going to ask you how many years you've been doing it, but I know in my own case, it's thousands and thousands. We know that children make mistakes. That's how we learn, don't we, from our mistakes? So we have to ask ourselves, as I say, we talked about road safety, we talked about rail safety. I wonder at what age you allowed your children to climb up and down stairs without holding your hand. At what age did we let them play in the garden unsupervised or go to the park alone? At what age did we allow them to take their bike out or go on a bus? Watch a film they haven't selected, go to an all-night party with mates. A parent pointed out to put a capital M on that, it means something different. I think I'd rather they went to the party with mates than without them. If anybody's not sure, ask somebody afterwards. But at what age do we allow them to meet friends that we don't know? Visit a home that we don't know? Watch 18 category movies, XXX movies, source legal or illegal substance, consider suicide or other self-harm. And all of the above and much more without any input from us in their bedrooms, on their devices. Because it's the most fantastic tool. They can find the answer to absolutely anything. 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So as the European Union discussed, at what age should teenagers pass the digital age of consent? It's about keeping them safe until they are able to keep themselves safe. And the more we empower them with these conversations, the safer they will be able to be. These are incredibly powerful tools. They're great playthings, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be. But they can become dangerous weapons, aren't they? I'll leave the final words to Sir Tim Berners-Lee. If you don't know who he is, he's the person that wrote the program that drives the web. He created the internet. He wrote the program between 1989 and 1995. In 1995, he gave it to the world. He made no money out of it whatsoever. He gave it to the world. I remember listening to a radio interview with him some years ago now, I must admit, and I heard him saying he worried at times about the monster he created. I'm one of those sad people that talks to the radio in the car because I haven't got anybody else with me. I said, no, you didn't create a monster. You created the most fantastic tool, but sometimes it's used by monsters. And that's the bottom line. We don't want our children to be turning into those monsters. We want them to use it sensibly. And as he says, the main thing to remember, any really powerful thing can be used for good or evil. Dynamite can be used to build tunnels or make missiles. Nuclear energy for bombs or electrical power. So what's made of the web is up to us. You, me, and everyone else. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave you with those final pieces of advice in this video. And thank you so much for giving me your time this evening. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. finding time.
Add as well, thank you. Such an emotional topic, and you're right, and that's, these are our children, they are our most valuable. You know, we want to protect, and you're so right to say, you know, we do that road safety, we do the train safety, all of that, and yet we forget. So very important. And I know, I was just thinking about it, actually, what it feels like sometimes, the analogy is you're standing on the edge of a busy motorway trying to teach the children. We wouldn't do that, we'd never do that with a little toddler. And yet sometimes that's what it feels like. We don't have the tools to be able to give that information to our children to protect them. Take it one step at a time. Stand on the edge of a country road, quiet country lane. Cross that road first. Upskill yourself. Learn information that you can. Find out. Read up. Don't leave it to someone else to do it. Was my plea. I'm mum of 3 children, as you know, and it's tough. And parenting is hard work. We know that it's really, really hard work. But if we just bury our heads in the sand and become the ostrich, our children will not benefit from that. So we've got to be brave. We work our way up to that busy motorway. And if we had to, we could cross a busy motorway. We wouldn't choose to necessarily, but we could do it. And you can do it. You really can. We all have the tools to do it. And we're here to hold your hand. We're the school, you know, who, like you say, we've had lots of children who we've observed, we've seen, we've experienced lots and lots of different scenarios. We can talk you through them. Your child's an individual, so we'll talk to you about your child, because that's the most important thing. So don't be frightened. Yeah, this is very sobering, this information, really, really sobering. But actually, it's hugely empowering. And, you know, if we get it right, we really serve our children well. So, Paul, thank you so much. Really, really valuable. And please do come and talk to us. I've got an amazing app, by the way, which I use with my children. We talk about monitoring and filtering what children watch. You monitor it by, you know, obviously seeing after the event, but you can filter that as well, so you can stop certain websites from being accessed, and it's all very age relevant and lack controls after it's called Custodio. And I'm very happy to share that information with you afterwards, and that really helped me to parent my children when I didn't know all the answers. Custodio helped me as well. They're very good. They send you information on a monthly basis. So, but I can share that with you again. Don't worry if you don't forget that.
How do you spell that?
It's Q
QUSTODIO.
I mean, the things that I was hoping that I was here now, how did that step ahead, like with the audio, how did you step ahead of what is out there?
The answer is you can't.
I completely understand we can't, but there are, because I mean, I can't even like cope with things, so how can I cope with things? But I am sure there must be some ways that we can be informed, not as parents only, but as individuals, that there are these like things. So what is the best way, or some way? There must be a step.
Could I suggest something? We've agreed already that Google actually has the answer to just about everything you could possibly want. My feeling is, if your child is 6, then just Google search, what do I need to know about 8-year-olds? And then prepare yourself, as Nina said, that it's about working up to the next level. So look ahead, look on Google. There's loads of parenting advice guidance out there. Ask, you know, what do I need to think about with 8-year-olds if you've got a 6-year-old? What do I need to think about with 10-year-olds if you've got an 8-year-old? And that's the way to keep ahead as much as you can, except of course that by the time your child gets to 8, you'll be 2 years further on. So you keep looking until they get to 8, and then you start looking at 10.
It's changing, isn't it? And so we could give you a spreadsheet, be out of date, that's kind of give it.
No, but I know, no, I don't expect.
No, I know, yes, no,
I
absolutely.
The key, if they're on Snapchat and the Snapchat, like the parents start closing down the Snapchat, because we think that it's not safe, they find other ways. Like initially they had WhatsApp, then WhatsApp became a Snapchat. So the next thing might be Click or Plot or whatever. So how do we hear about it?
Yeah, I mean, this is also where the education part comes in as well. There are 2 ways of doing it. You can stop it, but it's like doing anything, it will go underground. So it's about those conversations of And, you know, and having the courage as a parent to say to your child, can I have a quick look through it? Let's have a look and see what you've been saying to your friends. What have your friends been saying to you? Okay, let's talk about this conversation. This one doesn't feel right. And it's about having open dialogue with your child around the table where, you know, let's face it, in an ideal world, they'd be happy about it. Here we go, mummy, I'll hand it over. Yes, of course. They're not going to do that. Of course they're not, because they, you know, they get into a stage where they want their privacy. And we need to respect that as well. But when you get to a point where you see every time you look, okay, this feels good, and this feels like a healthy relationship. I don't need to check quite as often now. I'm still going to check every now and again, but actually, you know what? And I think that message is so powerful to give a child. But don't forget, they're always having new influences. They're always being exposed to new things. So you have to keep checking in. But you've also got to show them that you're doing it, A, from a position of love, and B, that you trust them when you see that they've made one. I think that's a really powerful. Sorry.
That's one. The sad reality is that you cannot protect them 100% because you cannot filter everything. There's very powerful algos behind the suggestions, what they're looking at. TikTok is probably one of the worst. You can't put parental controls on. Once you start getting a footprint, get led down this rabbit hole, as you mentioned. But what you can do is you can spend time with them, explain to them that what's in front of them is curated by other people or machines. So you can choose to turn some of it off, but not all of it. It's a bit like you wouldn't want your child to go to Soho when they're 10 years old, but you have to kind of teach them that you can be let there even though you don't want to go there. Then teach them warning signs that this is go a little bit too far. But sometimes, I guess, you just have to do a tire kick on what they're doing and what they're looking at. But you really don't have anything else to do than either turn it all off or just teach them.
Yeah, we should never think that we can eliminate all risk. And therefore, we have to help them to learn to manage risk. That's the thing. I mean, when I was a child, we would disappear off at dawn with a bottle of pop and a packet of Jaffa cakes in our saddlebag. And our parents didn't know where we were, what we were doing, but we learned to manage risk. Actually, we've got a situation now where we don't let our children go out. They don't learn about those risks. But instead, we think, oh, phew, they're okay because they're upstairs in their bedroom, the internet. But we don't talk to them about those risks. We've got to help them to manage those risks. We can't remove them. We can't remove the risks.
So it's very good that we have.
That's the difficulty.
Like the School of Design.
That's the difficulty.
Because we don't know. We don't expose ourselves. I don't know. But my girls, they don't have it, but they know because they're receiving like little links by their friends. So they're exposed to it whether I want it or not,
Yes.
or I'm not. So
Well, as I said earlier on, you know, if we said they couldn't do it, they'd go to their friends and do it. Their friends
They
have.
can actually access anything that's going viral on,
Yes.
even if you put in filters
Oh yeah.
and ban all the apps, they can still access it.
Yes. Absolutely.
So my girls are not any social media. They have YouTube because they need it for educational purposes. And they just, you know, the algorithm brings it all up. Whatever's viral,
As
whatever happens.
the colleague said, unfortunately, algorithms monitor what you are doing, and therefore lead you down a rabbit hole. It's perfectly logical.
yeah, you just write the first letter,
Yes.
and then a series of things come up, and then you try to figure out, oh, what is there?
Yeah.
How effective are, like, for example, Microsoft? Only for my daughter.
Yeah.
I can see what she's one thing. So she looked a good sausage costume for a 38 years old dad, which I thought it was really cool. But I can exactly see what she's looking. I block TikTok. Are these things actually they work, or these they find a way to go?
I think they, like anything else, children will find a way around these. But if we don't try with them, then we've not tried our best. As I say, I think whatever we come down to, whatever we try, the most important thing is to have the conversations around the dining table. And that's a metaphorical dining table, obviously. You know what I mean? It is to having those open dialogue.
But at what age would you give Maybe I've been
Yeah, again,
pictured as the Taliban who doesn't want to go home
yes,
to my children.
again, I mean, the things change. As I say, I've got a 32-year-old, a 28-year-old, a 22-year-old, a 21-year-old, and a 14-year-old. The 21-year-old and 22-year-old were furious that we gave my 14-year-old a phone when she was 9. Because they said, you made us wait till we were 11. Things change. And also, they didn't have a smartphone because then there weren't those smartphones. Now you can't get anything that isn't a smartphone. Equally furious that our youngest daughter has a smartphone because things change. So it is difficult.
But ideally,
Ideally, I would just say, hang on as long as you can before you give in. But I mean, we gave out one to our 9-year-old because we happened to be in an area where there were middle schools. She had to go on a bus. So that's why we gave her a phone. But it was very limited. She could access it because it was a smart, able to things in place on it. And certain things. But yeah, you're right. We can't prevent it all. And of course, the chances are, if her phone wouldn't access something and she wanted to see it, a friend down, next to her or down the road, possibly her phone wasn't in quite the same way secure. So there's no escaping having those conversations, those regular conversations, helping them to make the choices.
but if someone, and maybe the school should be saying in general, no one should be recommended having a phone 12, because if there's one that falls, all the other ones have the excuse to the other one.
Yeah.
So one of my children's, my son's school says the recommended time to go to bed is 7:30. So for us to say, well, it's not us saying that, it's the schools. If I could go to my daughter and say the school recommends no phone before 13, it helps us as well.
No, I
But
understand.
that doesn't seem to find anywhere
But
a
it's
proper
not
age.
just phones, devices.
Devices of all sorts.
iPhones,
Devices, yeah.
Access to the internet.
When they go
They all
to
have.
Anything with the iPhone.
they're allowed to have them.
We have to recognise that in 2022, in 2022, the internet is central to learning, absolutely central for all of us, just children. It is absolutely central to learning. Therefore, we have to recognise that, and then help them make the wise choices. All we
But
can.
there's still a way to restrict this. And the school says no more device after 6 o'clock. They don't need a device after 6
No, but
Every family has their own logistics, every family has their own decision-making capabilities, they're all adults. So I think ultimately the adults in the family as a school that might not work. And I think, yeah, like I said, we work with you, but it's really hard. We can't step into your family home and say this is. So that's something that, and it's a conversation I have had to have with my children as well. I understand it. It's difficult.
the other thing,
Yeah, this is exactly my
Yeah,
question.
no. So, but not yet, but.
Because we would
What
love.
I'd say because that video that you showed at the beginning, we watch it once or twice a week at home. I play it to them because I work in advertising.
Right.
It's online, you can get it.
Yes.
So for me, it's that constant reminder of and reminding them it's out there. So I don't know if the other girls have seen it, but both of my girls have seen it, and every time I show it to them, they are scared about it. It's that reality.
Which one?
I'm slightly worried that you say. I'm slightly concerned. Sorry, I'm slightly concerned that you said that they are scared. I think it's very
Scared,
important.
but a reality check.
Okay,
That's
I was
the
going to say
reality check.
it's very important we don't frighten children. We empower them.
There a talk plan for the girls.
Not we've done talks, done a lot of talks. Girls have had conversation. It's an ongoing thing, and it's like anything you drip into read and hopefully something. But yeah, and coming back, he's going to do some training with us. Hopefully, that's the process of being booked.
Is it
and
right?
yes. It is.
Oh, it's all okay.
Yeah, exactly. Why not? But it's really.
I would
really appreciate, like when I started, she told me that there's the dark web or the, and I'm not
Deep
very
net.
familiar. I'm not familiar with that at all, but then when she said there's a calculator app, number in, you go somewhere, I have no knowledge.
This is what your colleague here was talking about, the rabbit holes. The algorithms lead you down rabbit holes. You can't. You can't. You can't.
The honest truth, and you will die trying. And you'll feel guilty for the rest of your life. If you can do that's different. I think just got all the responsibilities for our own children and we as a school children when they are here. Working in partnership, we'll do a much better job if we all sit back with our hands. That's the key.
Then we have the girls who have phones because they're walking to whatever, have spot checks. If they've got TikTok,
No,
if they've got,
No, you can't.
But I tell you why,
it.
I mean, the reason that disturbs me that this, I'm looking at the phone, for some school,
Yes.
because if I open up a phone and they're photographs, first thing that comes on the phone, I am violating their privacy. I don't know what's going to pop up. And let's say, and I'm not saying this, let's say those, untoward things came up. I am now viewing child pornography. So it's not only putting your child at risk, it's putting my teachers and myself at risk. And it's not something that we as a school will do because it's illegal to do that.
And parents' personal information as well.
Absolutely.
So you never win though. Like at this rate, like for instance, with TikTok, a number of girls have TikTok. Mine included, by the way, and I'm not obviously well informed. She's my youngest. I've got older ones. Touch with their fabulous. But the younger one, the others have it, Mom. I gotta have it. I gotta have it. Everybody else, I'm missing out. And I've got this FOMO child in my that I didn't have with other two.
Yes, that's the other thing that we have to recognise. As I say, my 14-year-old, my 21 and 22-year-old was so cross that she had a phone, etc., etc. But actually, of course, she was learning from them, and they were learning from the 32-year-old and 28-year-old. And inevitably, therefore, my youngest daughter, is probably the most informed in that respect. And that's why it's even more important we have these conversations with her, because she was exposed, if you like, to things by her older siblings before they were. And therefore, we need to have conversations more with her than we do with any of the others.
The thing that you can do is you can limit their time.
We
So-
do, you know what, we
Yeah.
did screen time.
Yeah.
You want to know what immediately? Changes the clock time on screen.
No, physically,
To make it
Rita,
work.
physically, take it
Well,
away.
obviously we do that, but when we
That's
take
the
it away,
only, that's the
take
only
it
thing
away
to
for
do.
2 weeks.
No,
It's gonna say,
It's, you have a schedule, now have your phone, and you can now not have your phone. That's the only way that works, because once they have TikTok, the design of
But I want
TikTok,
to remove.
the design of TikTok is to have them on there for as long as possible.
Or you just don't give them the phone. We survive without it.
Sorry, whatever the message. Sorry, well organized. Benefit listening. And all I think they're quite approachable from an 11-year-old point of view.
We have, well, yes, I mean, this was the parents' session. We have presentations, as I say, for reception class in year 1. We have presentations for year 2. We have presentations for year 3 and 4, year 5 and 6, year 7 and 8. They're all
Yeah.
developing.
But these girls are more advanced.
Yeah.
These
How,
6 girls are very advanced.
what is the differentiation between the talk you showed us and for a year 6 talk? Because as the parent said, this is very, I mean, I think my 10, 11-year-old daughter has been exposed actually.
Oh, yes.
Unfortunately.
One of
The last couple of
Yeah.
weeks,
I think it's important for the girls, because I've seen it with my eldest, and I think it's important for the girls understand this before they approach the secondary school. And because so much, they get a lot of free time now, finish the 11th class.
Absolutely.
I think it's a very crucial period.
As I said, we have been doing a lot with girls, but we can explore. I know you're a very busy man and you're heading off overseas for a bit, aren't you? But we can certainly explore putting, more things in place. I don't think we can ever stop. I don't think we'd ever say we've done enough.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
You said, how do we win? We'll never win. It's a constant.
Actually, suppose that we fail, given numbers of people, someone will fail. Some of the kind of behavior for signals you kids, especially as they approach aging, actually something might have happened that often we do. This, as someone said, it's really, really hard. Red told. But it's definitely something that we can do when something happens and avoid them.
So there are different girls behave in different ways when they've been exposed to things like that. Sometimes, if a girl who normally is quite addicted to cocaine suddenly says, "Hey, you can take it away just for a bit," that's often a signal something's happened. That's a change in behaviour. So any significant changes in behaviour are things to look out for. But also when they go quiet. That often, so at this age, if they've seen something, a bit like you say, the anger, the guilt, the embarrassment, if it's something they've done wrong or they've seen something, they will often go quite quiet after that. And so again, look out for those changes in behaviour. We as a school, we're constantly talking about the girls and we notice the changes in behaviour. It's really important that we put support in place. But these things aren't necessarily quick fixes because their brains are developing and they're not fully developed. So they're trying to rationalise something that they don't have the full capability of rationalising. So we've got to put appropriate support in place for them. At the same time as try and help you as parents. That's why this workshop was put on tonight, because we know that you at the moment there's a lot going on. And the understanding around that is really, really vital. And it just starts the conversation. We're not here to give you all the answers tonight. We can't do that. There's no workshop that could ever fulfill that brief. But it hopefully starts the conversation and shows you we want to have an open dialogue. And then, we'll work with you. So if you notice changes in behaviour, come and talk to us, please. It might be completely unrelated. It might be something completely different, but it might not be. And then we can catch it early and we can deal with that.
And maybe if you see that change as well during the school hours, because you see the girls a lot more.
Yes.
Do girls know that they can come and talk to the teacher?
Absolutely.
And if they do come and talk to you, do you come and tell them? So, or will you keep that relationship?
If it's appropriate to do so, we will always pick up the phone to you and we will talk. We'll never disclose to you that we've spoken to another parent about their child as well, because that's very personal to them.
But if you speak to my daughter, you always tell me. Is there a scenario where you speak to my daughter, you're not going to tell me?
If we think it's something that if we were to, if we haven't got enough information, we need to find out more. We don't necessarily initially come and talk to you. Sometimes they may tell us something and it's a level that we as a school are dealing with, and then we wouldn't necessarily. If it's not going to be a deep concern or affect your daughter significantly, because there's a relationship trust there as well. But, equally as a parent, I know what that feels like. Why did nobody tell me? First one to be told. So where it's appropriate to do that, and it's the right actions to do that, then absolutely we would do it.
Can I just add something? The basic principle of safeguarding goes back to a piece of legislation called the Children Act in 1989. And the first principle, Children Act 1989, says the child's welfare. So the schools are operating on that principle. If it is in the best interest of the child to tell you, and very rarely, admittedly, but in rare circumstances, it might be that at this particular moment, not the best time to parent, then the child's welfare transcends any other duty. That's a statutory requirement placed on schools. Children Act 1980. That's an ancient piece of legislation, but it's still a basic principle.
I want my daughter to actually feel safe at school and she feel that she can trust. And I think as they grow older, going especially to the majority of us, our kids are going to secondary school. I have realized my elder friend is that they trust the school as a safe space. It's not that they don't trust the parents or that their parents are not going to do the right choices. it's their individuality they start growing up.
Yes.
And they need to be able to feel that the school will not tell us.
And also they might want something, they might want something to change, but they don't want to let you down by letting you know that they've done something wrong. And it's about them caring so much about you, they don't want to let you down. And that's why they may tell the school. Then. And we have to acknowledge that, and that is in the child's best interest, the child's welfare being paramount.
I think if we can request, I know you're very busy, but it would be amazing if you could give a talk to our girls, even if it's during school hours. I think most of us would rather have them miss a maths lesson and listen to.
Be grateful for that. Talk to the girls. Also, if we could have something about mental health, eating disorders, self-harm, something to give us signs, tools,
Actually,
as parents.
I was talking with Jeannie and I was suggesting that one talk that we first time in Santa Clara is about body image and mental health issues, because I think our girls are at that age. They will be dealing with that all the time.
And they're doing it earlier, and that's the thing. Parents, I've got 19-year-old with 17-year-old. I had no issues. The whole, I navigated. This almost feels like my 10/11-year-old is far more advanced than the other two.
There will be.
And I'm sort of
There will be.
scratching my head because I don't know how to approach it.
They will be. I mean, I'm saying she will be
She,
more advanced than they are, because as I said, my own 14-year-old learnt from a 32-year-old, 28-year-old, 22-year-old, 21-year-old. And so of course he is more advanced, but also compared to the world back in when the 32-year-old was 14, and compared to the world when the 22-year-old was 14, this is a very different world. There it's moved on, and therefore we have to approach it differently.
Talk about this. Yes, all day, all through. Now, because children's not. Right, of course, we stick them in, they stick them out.
Yes.
So
Any self-respecting teenager has two phones,
Yeah.
one to hand in and one to keep in their bag. Yeah.
The school policy now is banned. Whereas when my 18-year-old was doing or whatever it was, so
It's because the schools understand
changing.
they understand now that the algos are there to make them products. It's there to get them on there all the time, to sell them stuff, to create a profile. That profile they create now on the internet will live with them for the rest of their life. Not the one you can see, but the one they read of you when you go on a news site and say, this person's interest is this. Apple News is completely curated. It's based on that internet footprint they create now.
But we banned, like, we wouldn't let our. But then in the classroom, you can't control who she hangs out with.
No, but it's I don't know, but it's not. It's not. I agree. It's good that schools say this is a safe space for all this stuff. Leave it around, leave it away. But it probably goes from a point to 4. You can only limit the time that they have with the device, but physically take it off the clock. They will take it away or say, here we only use the device at this time. In the same way as if you would have a staff meeting, you say to people, here we don't use mobile phones. We're having a meeting. They need to learn to themselves.
Yeah, they have to
Exactly. Manage it themselves.
dining table.
Yeah, yeah.
Rather than telling them, you can't do this, you must watch out for that. You can't, this is dangerous for you.
Nowadays, to be fair, they don't have reading. I've got free time. I've got nothing. What do you do? Like
Music practice.
What do-
I do a lot of
Read the-
music practice.
read the-
Yeah.